Hi, everyone. I'm Bill Squadron, President of Our Energy Policy, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon, where we're going to be talking with Jigger Shaw and Phil Kangas from the Department of Energy's Loan Program Office, one of the most critical divisions of our federal government right now when it comes to the development of energy projects all over the country. So we're going to get to it without really any delay because this is such an important topic. First of all, I do want to thank our energy policies partners and sponsors who help make this possible, and particularly our thanks to the international law firm of Bracewell LLP, which has been a key underwriter of this series. And for those of you listening, we will at the end of the hour get to your questions. So please use the tab that allows you to write in your questions, and we will get to as many as we can before the end of the hour. This is, of course, part of the Energy Leaders webinar series from OEP, designed to provide resources, education, information to all of you out there who are stakeholders in the energy world. And again, thanks to our partners. Now we're going to get to this conversation right away, and our first part of the conversation is going to be a discussion between Melanie Kenderdine and Jigger Shaw, who is the director of the DOE Loan Programs Office. I'm going to turn it over to Melanie. Melanie is a principal with the Energy Futures Initiative, and during the Obama administration, she was the energy counselor to Secretary Moniz and the director of the Department of Energy's Office of Energy Policy and Systems Analysis. Before that, the executive director of the MIT Energy Initiative. So Melanie, we're going to turn it over to you, and welcome Jigger as well, and we'll dive right in. Melanie?
Great. Thank you so much, Bill, and thanks to everyone for joining. I think this is a hugely important topic. I'm going to introduce Jigger Shaw and ask him a few really easy questions, Jigger. Okay.
I should be interviewing you, Melanie.
But the Jigger Shaw is our distinguished guest today, and he became the director of the Loan Program Office at DOE in 2021. Consistent with his current position, Jigger is widely known for his efforts to create and advocate for market-driven solutions to climate change. Prior to his work at DOE, Jigger was the co-founder and president of Generate Capital and founded Sun Edison in 2003, where he pioneered a, quote, no money down solar, quote, unquote, and unlocked a multi-billion-dollar solar market, creating what was the largest solar services company worldwide. He co-founded Carbon War Room with Richard Branson and Virgin United. He has many, many other accomplishments, including, and this I'm very jealous of, Jigger, authoring a book in 2013, Creating Climate Wealth, Unlocking the Impact Economy. He was also the co-founding co-host of The Energy Gang, a podcast dedicated to exploring the technological, political, and market forces driving energy and environmental issues. Jigger, that's a long list of accomplishments, but it helps frame why your views are so important to today's discussion, that incredible background. Everyone will listen to you because of what you're doing now and an incredible background. And I wanted to first let you give 4 or 5 minutes to describe your priorities in the LPO in general, but I'll do that I'll frame it as a question.
Sure.
Okay. You can help us and the broader audience who's out there tuning in to understand what is at your top of your mind for the LPO program right now and in the future. And so.
Well, thank you, Melanie. First of all, just really thank you for your leadership and all of the folks who are tuning in today. The Department of Energy has been really the most important provider of funding around innovation for over 45 years. And today we have a suite of technologies that are ready to go because of the leadership that you've shown and others have shown in important sectors, whether it's carbon sequestration and storage or hydrogen or nuclear or other places. And today, the Loan Programs Office is a safe place for all of those people to come to commercialize their technology. As you know, these technologies really are not commercialized for anything less than $1 billion. right? Whether it's the first large nuclear plant, which might be 10 billion, or whether it's the first large hydrogen facility, which might be 3 or 4 billion. All of these technologies are measured in billions when we get to a commercial scale. And for a lot of these first of a kind technologies, commercial debt just does not want to go first. And so the Loan Programs Office is here to go first. And we're underpinned by over 10,000 engineers, scientists, and experts on the DOE and National Lab platform that gives us the confidence to know that these technologies actually are proven and are ready to be scaled up in a way that a commercial bank really just doesn't have access to all of that expertise. Today, we've got over 200 active applications seeking about $260 billion of loan proceeds from our office. And so I do think that as opposed to decades past, where America was not clear as to whether it wanted to commercialize technologies here, and in fact, licensed a lot of our technologies to countries around the world for commercialization efforts. I think today we are choosing to commercialize our technologies here. One of the areas that I am most interested in right now is, as you know, we received a new loan authority under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and Inflation Reduction Act called the 1706 program, which is the Energy Infrastructure Reinvestment Program. And under that program, we're helping a lot of existing asset owners get more out of their existing footprint, either adding more megawatts to their existing footprint, repurposing an old oil refinery or old methane pipeline to a CO2 transport pipeline or other things. And so we now have about $128 billion worth of loan requests that either have come into the office for that program or are being actively prepared and are in consultations with our office. And so as a result, we see a lot of the stresses that a lot of these companies are going through. About 90 billion of that is coming from electric utilities who are struggling within their integrated resource plans to figure out how we return back to load growth.
That was going to be my next question, is about load growth. It's a huge issue these days. We're putting out a paper. We had a workshop on it a couple weeks ago. We're going to be putting out a paper on load growth. And I was wondering, Jigger, if you could explain more in depth why investors and policymakers, industry should be focused on load growth. Why is it so important right now?
Well, I think, as you know, in the late 70s and 80s, we had this huge explosion of load growth from air conditioning, right? And, many Americans decided to add air conditioning when previously really didn't, thought of it as an extreme luxury. As a result, we decided to build a lot of natural gas power plants that were designed to operate only 30 to 50% of the time. And we changed fundamentally our load shape in this country to a peaking, load shape where air conditioning really led the peak. We upgraded all of our transmission lines. We upgraded our distribution lines. And as a result, today we only use our existing asset base about 40% of the time. Contrast that with the 1970s, where we used to use our asset base about 70% of the time, right? And today we have technologies, after 30 years of testing and piloting, that can return us back to 70% of the time. But what that requires is a deep understanding of how our grid operates, right? We have generation on one side, and then we have pipes that move that generation to where people are using load, right? Transmission and distribution. And then we have load. And even up until today, load gets to do whatever it wants, and generation and transmission distribution have to serve it, right? Load is not told, except in small cases through interruptible rates, to control itself, right? Now, separately, we are in a situation where we have technologies where we can use what we've already paid for more efficiently. So, for instance, we have grid enhancing technologies that we invented 20 years ago, like dynamic line ratings or smart wires or other things. And they've been fully rolled out now in the UK, in Brazil, in India, and other places using American technologies, but we have not fully rolled it out here. Why? We know because, electric utilities made money by putting capital out the door, and capital efficient solutions weren't things that they were focused on. But today they have a lot of things to invest in. We have old transmission lines, we have old, transformers, and a lot of folks have enough stuff to invest in. So they're open-minded today in a way that they weren't before around grid enhancing technologies. They're also finding that everyone is buying new appliances and it comes with an app, whether it's a new refrigerator or a new water heater or a new thermostat or your EV charger or a battery, right? That the increasing numbers of people are buying backup batteries instead of backup diesels and natural gas generators. All of them come with an app. Once you come with an app, that means that you can give permission to someone else to modulate your demand in exchange for a discount. And a lot of the utilities that are piloting this are offering people 20% discounts on their bill in order to participate in demand flexibility, right? I mean, National Grid just this last month announced that a 10% shift in their peak demand would save them 40% of their grid costs, right? So that's why this is something that's interesting. So I would say that part of what we're seeing is that we can do more with what we've already paid for. And so you're seeing a lot of interest in the 1706 loan program and others to start moving away from pilots and moving towards full rollouts. And then we separately need to build more generation because we are going to double the amount of electricity sales in this country at least by 2050. That represents 2.5 to 3% load growth compounded between now and 2050. And so we're going to need new nuclear plants. We're going to need new enhanced geothermal facilities. We're going to need to relicense the 37 gigawatts of hydro that people are currently giving up licenses for, and keep them running with fish-friendly turbines. And so that stuff will take time. And I think the grid enhancing technologies and the VPPs, the virtual power plants, will buy us that time.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mentioned we're putting out a load growth paper here very shortly. If it's not up today, I could be wrong. It might already be out there, but I don't think so. But close. And in that, I mean, with the workshop we had, and it was a private workshop, but a discussion of data centers, and I'm a big one for maps, and I have a map of current data centers. There are 1,850 data centers in the United States. And at the workshop, they're expecting those to double in 5 years. Okay, so 3,700 data centers, huge demand for electricity and infrastructure, focusing on those data centers and the required amount of energy and infrastructure necessary to ensure they can continue to operate and expand, like I just described. Is there any space in the LPO that you would like to highlight in that regard?
Yeah, I think when you think about data center load, right, what makes it so difficult to serve is that it really wants 8760 power with only 5 minutes of downtime, right? And so as a result, it by definition makes the grid less efficient because it makes the peaks even higher. And so as a result, you have to build up the transmission grid, build up the distribution grid, where when you have a new manufacturing facility, a lot of the new manufacturing facilities will sign up to an interruptible rate. And so if you give them notice and say, hey, we'd like for you to be shut down for the next week for maintenance, it would be really good for us. They're willing to do that in exchange for a cheaper price, right? And so because the data center load is so inflexible, they're really expensive to serve. And they realize this. So when you talk to Microsoft and Google, they're on their website, they say that they have committed to 24/7 clean matched power by 2030. That means nuclear, enhanced geothermal, and in some cases hydro. It could mean solar and wind, but you probably have to match it with, 12 to 18 hours worth of batteries if you're going to do solar and wind, right? And that's expensive. So when you look at all the different options on the table, they're prepared to pay what it takes to be able to prevent a cost shift to ratepayers, right? Because one of the things that they recognize is if they get an economic development rate and all of this infrastructure has to be upgraded, then that means a 10% rate increase for everybody. And they don't want a $2 trillion company being accused of raising rates by 10% for everybody, right? And so they're having these tough conversations, but electric utilities are being caught flat-footed because most of the electric utilities are saying, we don't know how to serve you as an individual customer who wants to pay a premium for 24/7 power, right? We're used to rate basing everything across all of our ratepayers and offering everyone the same price for all of our services. So this is a new paradigm for us to step into, and we are admittedly slow in adopting this paradigm. So we want to build new nuclear, we want to build new enhanced geothermal, but we want to spread those costs across all ratepayers because that's what we're used to doing. And that would be expensive, as you know. And so the data centers on this side want to pay a premium because they want to be good corporate citizens. They don't want the cost shift, and they certainly don't want gas going into poor neighborhoods, which is often where it's cited, increasing pollution in justice communities, right? And so they want to be good citizens, but they also don't want to vertically integrate into the electric power generation business. They want to sign a contract with somebody to supply them power. And regulators, of course, in the middle are saying, after 20 years of no load growth, we're now learning that we have to figure all this stuff out. And so many of the regulators are wholly unprepared to arbitrate these conversations. And governors are also weighing in, and the governors are being even more specific. They're saying if it's either a data center or a manufacturing facility with 900 family-sustaining jobs, I want you to pick the manufacturing facility with 900 family-sustaining jobs, right? And so we're in a place where we all want to win the AI race against China and other places, but these are new muscles that we're flexing right now. And the Loan Programs Office is in the middle of it because we fund new nuclear plants. We fund enhanced geothermal plants out of our Innovative Clean Energy Program, Title 1703. But we're also being asked by the electric utilities to help make a second home for coal plants that have been retired, and nuclear plants fit very nicely there. And so we're getting a lot of applications in from electric utility companies to repurpose existing sites.
You're actually raising some issues that I've been thinking. I'm the person of weirdo ideas at the Energy Futures Initiative, looking at these huge demand for electricity at data centers, and could we at some point have purpose-built like micro reactors, nuclear reactors at the
Oh, for
sites,
sure.
at
That
the
is
sites, and make them large enough to generate green hydrogen produce green hydrogen at the same time. But the issue that raises, and I think you raised a lot in your discussion just now, is I'm not sure that the current electricity market structure can help enable that. That market structure, I was at the Department of Energy in the Clinton administration. We debated the current electricity market structure in 1998. It was codified in 2005, but it was structured in 1998. Think about what's happened, everything you've just talked about that's happened since 1998. I really think it's time to revisit a market structure, but that's just my issue. Okay.
Well, it's all of our issue, and
Yeah.
Google and Microsoft, as you know, put out a white paper around changes to the Federal Power Act that they thought might be necessary. And so all of these things are things that, I'm glad that we have really intelligent folks like yourself working on. But I do think that we have near-term urgent problems and long-term fixes that we're going to have to work on, and we're going to have to do both. But I will say that I think it's important for people to recognize how valuable trust is in this conversation. So I think these broader visions of the future are not so far off. I think we're talking about 2034, 2035. So they're right around the corner. But today, right, we really have a trust problem. Right after the Vogtle nuclear plant construction, there's a lot of folks who are saying, do I want to take this on? Now, the good thing is that Unit 4 came in 30% cheaper than Unit 3, and they had to use, as many of you know, a Part 50 application process, which means that they had to tell the NRC exactly how they were going to build it, and they had to build it exactly that way, which is why the NRC feels very unyielding, but it's because that's the way that they went through the process. Now that Unit 3 and Unit 4 are completed, a Unit 5 that gets built could use Part 52, which basically says you build it and then we'll certify it after the end of the process. So small micro changes to the Unit 4 will be allowed, because long as it doesn't, impact negatively the way that the unit operates, which would save a lot of money. But even if you didn't um, make any changes from Unit 4, our belief is that you could build Unit 5 quite cost effectively because of all the things we've learned, plus 13,000 union workers that have been trained, right? And so I think the first step we have to take now is learn how to get our confidence back around building nuclear power in this country again. And that means doing things one incremental step different than what we did in Vogtle Unit 4, right? And or the BWX 300, which, Ontario Power Group has already agreed to move forward on 4 of those reactors, and they're going through their regulatory process and expect a full approval here early 2025, right? And so my sense is before we get too creative, we're going to have to start building those and get our mojo back, right? And realize that we can do big things in this country.
Well, I think you're pointing out that we lost the skill set, okay, for building nuclear reactors, and that, as you have underscored, we have now learned, and by building, and it's getting better and better. So that actually, I'd love you to, if you could, let's switch gears here a little and talk about geothermal energy, which has always been a huge issue for me.
Yeah.
I'm a New Mexican, a lot of geothermal in New Mexico. It is everywhere. I think it has enormous benefit and potential. And I was just wondering what you're doing at the LPO on geothermal and applications. What's coming through LPO on geothermal, and just wondering if you could say a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we've got a couple $2 billion worth of loan requests in for enhanced geothermal. Just so everyone catches up here, in 2008, 2009, we were all talking about geothermal Iceland style.
Right.
And Iceland style geothermal, OurMat does a lot of that work here in the United States. That really is tapping into established hot rock that stays hot, right? And water reservoirs as well, right? And so that's how that works. When you think about what we've done since the hydraulic fracturing revolution has taken hold, we have figured out how to create our own hot pockets using hydraulic fracturing. And so now we can make geothermal work almost anywhere. Now, it is clearly going to be the case that it will be cheaper to start building geothermal in the West, where we have a lot of subsurface data, where we have a lot of expertise, and you have a lot of natural formations. And as the costs continue to come down, we think the Midwest and the East will also be cost effective, but that will probably be in the 2040s, not the 2030s. And so my sense is you're going to see a lot of enhanced geothermal happen in New Mexico and Utah and Nevada and other these places in the West. And frankly, the Geothermal Technologies Office has done extraordinary work with their Forge effort in Utah, where they've tested all these hydraulic fracturing technologies, in the geothermal context, and have, received extraordinary results. And so today we're at a place where we know that we can make enhanced geothermal in the West for roughly the same cost as new nuclear. And our sense is with more experience, that number is going to keep getting cheaper and cheaper. And we're excited to see that. So we have a geothermal liftoff report that is going to be launched on during Sarah Week next week. So we're very excited in Houston. The secretary will be unveiling that. And frankly, a lot of the expertise and the funding for geothermal liftoff is going to come from that industry. We don't expect it to come from the solar and wind investors. It really will be hydraulic fracturing investors.
Right, and I actually just a comment on that, think that, and have been looking at a lot of different ways we can translate the skill sets of our conventional oil and gas workforce into clean energy, and that's a huge way we can do it. Okay, you can use it for offshore wind, but the knowledge of the subsurface, okay, is by and large held by the oil and gas industry, and using that and developing training programs, I think would be very, very helpful for the clean energy transition.
Oh, we
And
totally
I know-
agree. And we also have excess supply chain now. You know,
Right, right.
with the record amounts of oil and gas production that we have in this country, it's being done with a lot less drilling rigs than we were
Sure.
using in 2016. And so
Yeah.
we now have extra drilling rigs. We have extra, parts of the supply chain that's looking for more work to do. So geothermal is a great place to put it.
And natural hydrogen too.
Oh, for
I
sure.
think, yeah, I mean, looking at natural hydrogen is a huge, huge opportunity.
Yeah.
And I know we just have a few minutes left here. And I'd love to just sit down and have a drink with you, Jigger, and discuss all these things. But when we left, Secretary Moniz and I left the department, we had developed like regional innovation center plans. Okay, they didn't get carried through in the Trump administration, but very, very interested in regions of the country, a very different interests and needs and workforce and infrastructures, et cetera, et cetera. And I was wondering how distributed geographically are the LPO projects that you have? Is there a higher concentration in some regions than others? How do you look at that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And certainly we had a lot of concentration, as you can see in the map behind me,
Okay.
from LPO 1.0. But I would say that today it's actually across 48 states and one territory. The other two states we expect applications in any day now. And so we've got all 50 states covered. But even if you look at regions, you might have a couple regions that have a few more applications than other regions, but it's actually fairly even across all the regions throughout the United States. And so we're really seeing, as you suggested, a lot of latent expertise across our country, whether it's in nuclear or carbon sequestration and storage or hydrogen or advanced materials for transmission lines or, virtual power plants. And so you're seeing it's not really just a California-centric approach anymore. You're seeing innovations across the country. The last thing I'd say on that is the Department of Commerce have these tech hubs that they've announced, and the Department of Energy has also announced these hubs, really based on your vision in the past. And you're starting to see an extraordinary amount of, focus, frankly. I mean, the hubs really do a great job of focusing the mind and really educating people and bringing like-minded people together. So the level of speed at which this innovation is occurring now has never been faster.
Great. Well, thank you. I think that Bill and Phil have popped back up on the screen, which means it must be very close to 10:30 when Jigger has to leave us and go to another meeting. And I really appreciate your thoughts and would love to again sit down and I think I've run into you at the Bombay Club before. We should go back.
We should do that. Well, I just wanted to
Right.
give a shout out to, Jordan Crow and the rest of the Our Energy Policy team for putting this together. We have just been so amazed at the civil discourse that occurs that Our Energy Policy has been leading for, over a decade now. And it's welcome in our space. We are in a really serious time with energy, and we need serious conversations. We really appreciate you guys promoting those.
Well,
Great,
thank you
great.
for that. And our thanks to you and, of course, to Melanie for this conversation. I didn't know that it would get into mojo and geothermal liftoff. So that was a bonus. But, on a serious note, we actually will include, as you indicated, Jigger, we'll include, once it's available and publicly released, the geothermal liftoff report in the OEP library. So it's a resource. We'll include, Melanie, you made reference to the load growth
Right.
report that you all will be
We're
issuing.
putting
So
out,
all
it's
of
just a
that,
short paper, but yeah.
and all of that will be available for
Great.
all of you listening. And we also will be putting the recording of this on our site. And so that for people who either need to go back to it or know people who would like to listen, they'll have that chance. So Jigger, Melanie, thank you again for taking the time today. We're going to continue the conversation with Phil, and we wish you all a great rest of your day.
See you at Share Week. Okay. Bye-bye.
See you at Sarah Week. Our pleasure.
Bye-bye.
So it's now our pleasure to turn things over to Phil Kangas. And Phil has an absolutely instrumental role in this entire LPO process. I mean, he is the Loan Program Office's Director of Outreach and Business Development. He is the one leading the effort to work with borrowers, with applicants, and to make sure that the system is open, transparent, and operational in a way that really is effective. And so my first question, and by the way, I want to encourage all of you. I know we have some questions, and we will get to questions from the audience in a few minutes, but I want to turn it over to Phil to talk about what that process is, what the resources are that LPO applies to working with all of you out there that are interested in getting involved in this federal funding for clean energy projects.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. And, thanks for the opportunity here to talk with you and today to this larger community. As my title suggests, responsible for outreach and business development. And so I lead a team within the loan program office of about 50 or 60 people who are out in the market, who are, with us because they've worked in and around the energy industry and who know our programs well. And so our job is to both educate the larger community on what are the opportunities with the loan program office. We have several authorities across Title 17 for energy innovation and supply chain and energy reinvestment, as Jigger mentioned, under 1706. We have advanced vehicle manufacturing technology under ATVM and a tribal program, as well as CFIA, which is carbon sequestration programs. So our role is to both educate, the larger community about those opportunities, but then also develop, with those applicants, their applications and their assessment if they're really ready for us or not, because not everyone may be ready for to bridge that to get across the bridge to bankability. We as a requirement have to find those applicants that are really ready for commercialization and are ready for a loan. There are going to be some that maybe aren't quite there yet, that still haven't piloted maybe their innovations, that will be better candidates for a grant. And so part of our role is to help those applicants understand the opportunities, not just with the loan programs office, but also across the energy enterprise, and make sure that we're helping, enabling, that private sector leadership in the energy transition.
And when you're reaching out or advising interested parties who really would like to learn more and potentially get involved, what's the best way for them to kind of navigate the process, reach out, and get the kind of information they need to potentially engage with the office?
Yeah, I really think the best way is to go right to our website. We could share that URL if you don't already have it through the Department of Energy's energy.gov website. The Loan Program Office has a link for a pre-application consultation review. And so applicants are asked to fill out a set of data fields that allows us to connect them to one of our experts who works in that sort of submarket, and allows us to then have that first conversation. So that's certainly one way, and that's available to everyone, at any time. We have a lot of good information on the website also about the different program authorities, about some of the key questions that each applicant should ask themselves to see if they're ready for our program. And, to know and to begin the education process that this is, while we want it to be easily understood, it shouldn't be easy. We're talking about committing billions of dollars of taxpayer money. And so we have a stewardship role that we play and that we take very seriously. And our process allows us to manage and mitigate the risks that are inherent in some of these energy innovation and energy investment projects that purposely we are set up to help fund. We don't want to we're not in competition with the private sector. So that means that we operate where the market won't support in these investments. And so we're going to be talking about riskier investments. But our stewardship role and the process that we put in place behind it allows us to manage through and reduce or mitigate some of those risks that have had really the results that I think that the taxpayers want to see, right? We've had a loss rate at the portfolio level of something like only 3%, certainly in line with what a commercial bank would see. And we've actually, for the investments we've made, earned money for the U.S. taxpayer through the interests that we've collected and the fees.
You mentioned a minute ago these, kind of billions of dollars, and certainly the Loan Program Office is designed to provide financial support for very large scale energy and infrastructure projects. Can those mechanisms also be used to support projects that maybe are not quite at that scale, virtual power plants, distributed or localized energy production as well?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say so. Our average loan size is about $1 billion. Jigger made reference to this in his remarks. Our latest monthly application activity report, the MAR, shows that we've got about just over 200 applications in, and now the total value of applications is running about $260 billion. So the average loan is a large one. It's about $1 billion in scale, even greater than that now. But traditionally, we have not seen loans, smaller than about 100 million. And part of that reason is that our due diligence process, as an application moves through, my division, which is, outreach and business development, to the technical and environmental divisions for review, supported by the risk division, and then to origination. In that origination process, we have some required costs that are borne by the applicant. And those costs can run several $1 million because we do have to do a market analysis and market research. We do want to confirm that there'll be a reasonable prospect of repayment to the taxpayers. And because those costs are ultimately then part of that financial model, there's going to be a certain size that below which doesn't really make sense. Now that said, we have seen a pretty substantial interest. You mentioned virtual power plants, a lot of interest in virtual power plant investments. And so certainly we have seen scale in that category that have pursued and have succeeded at earning loans through our program.
And there are, of course, other programs, both federal and state, that are available for smaller size programs as well, including ones that are innovative and apply different approaches to technology.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, like I said, we consider ourselves in the Loan Program Office sort of like the front door, right, of the Department of Energy. So even if you may not be ready for us, I would hope still that you can reach out to our team so we can make some of those connections. There are a number of grant-making organizations across the department, ARPA-E, Small Business Technology Transitions, our Office of Sciences, MESC. So we want to make sure that we understand where the technology is today. And for those that aren't yet ready, we think about technology development to deployment. In our office, when you think about research, development, demonstration, and then deployment, we are really at that point of deployment. And up to that point, before there's the evidence of a proven pilot, there still is an interest in seeing those technologies succeed and an investment that the department is positioned to make. But those are most often grants, right? We're not, as an organization, looking for a repayment of the grants. But when we get to the point of the Loan Programs Office, there should be no technology risk that we see, very, very little project risk. There will be some market risks that we're helping the applicant address. And we're putting, again, the controls and the review in place to make sure that we're addressing those market risks. But at that point, we're really looking at getting, well, we need a repayment of the loan. And so that's what we're setting up.
Yep. Let me ask you about another area that's very important to the Biden administration, and that is the Justice 40 initiative and how the Loan Program Office is taking steps to contribute to the environmental justice goals that lays out.
Yeah, absolutely. So the program that we run here has set up what we call the community benefits plans. And a community benefits plan is now required for all of the Title 17 loans. And we've got some initial sort of drafts for how we'll also apply those in the ATVM and tribal space. But those community benefits plans need to show how the application intends to meet the Justice 40 goals, so that 40%, of the investments or the benefits actually accrue to disadvantaged communities, that there has to be a thoughtful and informed and sort of metric-driven approach to diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, that there have to be community engagement commitments and how they're actually looking at the impact that they'll be making in the community, and also a commitment to not just where traditionally we've had a Davis-Bacon compliance requirement, but also a commitment to working with organized labor, working with the communities to create high-paying, long-lasting jobs that will ultimately help those communities where we're putting this money.
So that's an important reference to the communities that are kind of involved, and Jigger mentioned the geographic kind of either concentration or diversity of the projects that the LPO is funding and is involved in. Can you talk a little bit more to the geographical element of it, and whether there are areas of the country that are more engaged right now, whether you're looking to try to get others more active, and how do you all approach that?
Yeah, it's an important question, and one too that kind of speaks to how we're set up. So we're not directing, where applicants are coming to us from. We don't have that ability. Ours is an office where anyone who qualifies for a loan would get considered. So we're not really picking kind of winners or losers, and that doesn't enable us to really direct where these applicants are geographically coming from. I can tell you that generally some of the qualities that an applicant is looking at as they do their site selection, which we do get information on site selection through the process. They'll often look at the availability of power or utilities tie-ins. They'll look at the available workforce, if they have access to community college or other universities. They'll look at logistics considerations, access to rail, ports, shipping, depending on the project. Certainly, if there are other state incentives that are at play, and there's a whole other sort of webinar we could do on how states are in competition for some of these big investments. But ultimately, the applicant needs to make those decisions, and often when they come to us, they've already done their site selection. I mean, our requirements are just to make sure that, irrespective of where that site selection has been, that we're seeing that those investments in communities are part of their planning.
Are there proactive outreach efforts? I know your role as the kind of leader of the business development part of the office must be kind of responsible for communicating with those those stakeholders that are most interested in being involved. So are there proactive kind of efforts that you all undertake to make sure people are aware of the opportunities here?
Absolutely. I mean, so we have teams that are set up aligned to different market segments, and those, part of our job is to be out in the market, attending conferences, talking to industry groups, and making sure that education is happening. One of the data points that Jigger mentioned again earlier was that we were at something like $260 billion now in our application pipeline, 200 applications. Looking back just 2 years ago, those numbers were about a third of where they are today. And so there's been an enormous focus, an enormous success, I think, of the team here. And I can't take credit for that. I've only been here for maybe 8 months. But what Jigger has created in the momentum of behind this office has really been fantastic. And so we've seen a lot of new interest from across the different market sectors. And we have teams set up in alignment to those different opportunities for clean energy technology. Now, there are going to be some, that really have kind of matured beyond where they make sense for the loan programs office. And I'm thinking, as an example, solar or wind technology, whereas maybe 10 years ago, we made an investment alone in that space. And what's happened is, hundreds of billions of dollars has followed in commercial investment. And so the bridge to bankability has been crossed. The markets, Wall Street is now willing to fund those technologies because they've been proven out. Tesla is another great example. It was one of our earliest loans. We made, $500 million loan to Tesla to get one of their first products, the Model S, off of the assembly line. And what's followed, as you can see, major investments in electric vehicles. So there are markets like that probably aren't as high a priority for us because we think we've done the work that we need to there, and we're not in competition, with the private sector we want where the capitalization is going to exist to let it work. But where purposefully we do need to lean in to provide that extra support, we want to be available to those. And so that's maybe where we would focus our education, is in some of those leading edge, kind of technology areas.
Yeah, no, you've made some really essential points that I'm not sure everyone fully appreciates. I mean, that bridge to bankability, the fact that you're not trying to compete with the private sector where that commercial opportunity is there, but rather to get things going to the point where they have shown that they can attract private capital. And I think that's really, really critical. We're now, if it's okay with you, Phil, we're going to take some questions from our audience. I think Julia has a number of very good questions that have come in, so I'm going to turn things over to her to read the questions we've gotten from our audience.
Thank you, Bill. Our first question, we have a participant wondering if you can talk about investments in carbon capture, utilization, and particularly storage projects.
Well, so one of our commitments is we can't sort of talk about specific projects that have come in. I could tell you that we absolutely have seen some interest in the storage space and in carbon capture. It continues to be an area of interest for ours in our team. We are looking, I can tell you today, at a couple different applications in that space. And so I do think that's a good place for the loan program office to be.
Thank you. Next question. How are federal investments impacting decisions of private sector entities such as banks and utilities to invest in clean energy efficiency and conservation?
Well, I can tell you, I think that our reputation is really a strong one because of the due diligence process that we put in place. I mean, we've seen this time and again where an applicant comes to us and, they get sort of into our process, into our part one application, which is an assessment of their eligibility to be part of our program. As they move then towards the second part of our initial application review, towards an eligibility determination, they use that fact that they are actually working with the Department of Energy's Loan Program Office to go raise additional capital. And we're seeing a lot of additional monies flowing into our applicants who are using kind of that relationship that they have to show that they are serious about this innovation. And so there has been I think a really good relationship there that we've had with our applicants and with the larger community to signal that these are areas that are real, and that we're expending the time and energy of the as Jigger said, 10,000 subject matter experts, scientists, engineers that the department has to validate and to vet that these are going to be part of the green energy future.
Thank you. Next question. Healthcare uses a lot of natural gas for heating and cooling their hospitals. Would they be eligible for a loan to do a project to move toward a cleaner source of heating and cooling?
So again, I do think that there are opportunities there, particularly for large systems, hospital systems, systems of higher education, as they bundle, their resource consumptions. They may actually become of a size that would be a viable sort of investment for the loan programs office, because of our, again, structured due diligence processes. Likely we wouldn't see a loan for less than $100 million. And so as long as the projects are of a certain size, of a certain capacity, I do absolutely think that those could be a viable applicant or set of applicants.
Thank you. Next question. Is the 1703 program mentioned available for transition of natural gas power plants to zero carbon technologies?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely it is. And the 1706 program is actually designed for energy reinvestment, retooling, restructuring. So as when an applicant comes to us through our pre-consultation process, one of the things that we'll do is really look at the various options that the applicant might have for these different programs and assess which is the best path for them to actually get a loan. And in 1703, for example, we do have an energy innovation requirement unless there's a partnership with a state energy finance institution, a SEFI. We do not have that innovation requirement in 1706. So it may be that depending on the scope of the project and the type of attributes that the application particularly would have, we can help guide the applicants to where they might find success.
Thank you. Okay, this next question has two parts. First, are offtake/PPA arrangements required for financing arrangements under the EIR provision of Title 17? And is there any plan to finance bulk energy storage projects in early stage development in states like New York, where storage programs are not well defined yet by NYSERDA?
Great question. So the first question was on the I'm sorry, ask me the first question again. I want to make sure I get
Yes,
the answer.
absolutely. Are offtake/PPA
That's right.
arrangements
Yeah.
required for financing arrangements? Yes.
Yes, and the answer is yes. We absolutely need to see offtake agreements, because that's one of the key criteria for us to know that there will be a reasonable prospect of repayment. And so we look at those agreements, the credit rating of the offtakers. We need to make a fair judgment that again, these loans will be repaid. And then just on storage, absolutely, storage continues to be a priority for us as we look at making this energy transition. I know that we're looking at partnerships with NYSERDA and other state energy financing institutions, but we'll continue to look at those applications on an individual basis.
So, Phil, can I jump in here, because you were talking a couple minutes ago in response to one of the questions about potentially large-scale healthcare institutions, large universities, maybe systems of higher education. So I was curious. I mean, as you all evaluate applications that come in and work with different applicants and borrowers, is there a preference for different, kind of categories of applicants? I mean, large scale utilities or different kinds of power generation companies versus, maybe partnerships with, technology companies or big education or healthcare institutions. How do you all look at that aspect of it as you evaluate these different projects and vet them?
So, yeah, I would say we don't really have a preference on the profile of the applicant. The projects that we fund have to be energy projects, right? That's one of our key criteria. But what's more important, is that there's measurable evidence of greenhouse gas reductions. Again, that it is an energy project. In some cases, that it actually there's evidence of an innovation, for 1703. But then we do look at, are there clear, is there a clear plan to revenue generation? And that means, are there offtakes? Is there a model that is defensible and that our financial advisors, can review and see a path forward? We do look at the experience of the management team, depending on the application. We look for folks who have experience in those technologies and are, have the ability to deliver on the commitments, because our commitment to the applicant is one to be present through the life of the loan. We don't make these loans and then resell them as some of us may have had experience with in our personal mortgages. We intend to be there through our portfolio management division for 10, sometimes 20 years. And so we do have a partnership with our applicants and invest in that trust building really from the very beginning when they come in the door, and we're working with them from our outreach team through the deal team involvement, through the conditional commitments and to funding, through the disbursements. So we do really look for a management team that I think we can trust and that trusts the Department of Energy as a full partner in actually seeing those through.
And that's really interesting, because let me ask you one last question, because I know we're running out of time, but you referred to this before about the timing in terms of sort of the timeline of these different projects. And where is the line between something that's more pure research that potentially would get opportunities for funding elsewhere, and where something is maybe not yet commercially bankable, but something that you feel is a loan-worthy project. How does that line kind of looked at?
So one of our criteria is that we have at least 1,000 hours of piloted evidence of success, and that's really a key, a key evaluation piece for us as we decide whether or not the technology has been sufficiently demonstrated to get to market, to get to commercialization. If it hasn't, then we would really want to work with our colleagues over in the Office of Commercial Energy Demonstrations, OSED, to find, where is there an opportunity to maybe provide more information on grant opportunities through that team. But for those that are, demonstrated and, ready to deploy, we want to be working with them, and we want to make sure that they understand, what are the elements of the offtake agreements we look for? How do we assess, greenhouse gas emissions? What are the type of regulatory and environmental considerations that need to be built into their plan? Because all of those are part of that path forward and fill the time that it takes to actually get one of these loans done. Again, we want to make sure this is easily understood, but it's not necessarily easy. So it is an investment for our applicants to make. It's hundreds and hundreds of hours potentially to get the money, but it's a lot of money. We're talking about billion-dollar investments, and so we do have to take it seriously.
And that's a great point. I mean, that 1,000-hour demarcation point or milestone is a very clear metric by which you're asking people to prove the viability of their project, and that's something people can, I think, wrap their head around. I mean, it's obviously a very challenging prospect sometimes for trying to work through this process, but you really laid it out so clearly, and I think also made it very clear to everyone in the audience how open and available you and your team are to working with potential applicants to explain to them how to make sure they're getting the information to you so that this can move forward effectively. I'm very grateful to you for taking the time to lay that out for everyone.
Yeah, well, thanks, Bill. Thanks so much for the opportunity here to talk. Thanks to, the Our Energy Policy team. I really enjoyed it.
Appreciate it. So to all of you in the audience, thank you for taking the time. If you do know people who couldn't make it today but would like to learn from the enormous insights we received from Jigger and from Phil, this will be posted in a couple of days on the OEP site. Also, absolutely take advantage of the OEP resource library, where we have, I really think, the largest collection anywhere of well-vetted papers, studies, reports, and so forth across all of these different energy issues. So please take advantage of that. Our thanks once again to our partners and supporters, and particularly Bracewell LLP for their support to make this possible, and to the OEP team, Jordan Crow, Jenna Soroka, Julia Safrodiana, and everyone else who worked hard on this. So I wish all of you out there a great day, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar coming in a few weeks. So please be on the lookout for that. Phil, thanks again, and to all of you, have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.